I folded the same report 3 times before Graham noticed my hand shaking. He stood in my office doorway, still wearing his security uniform, the radio crackling softly on his belt. "There's a technical break this weekend," he said, closing the door behind him. "The buildings will be empty." I set down my pen. After 23 years of marriage, I recognized that tone. Careful, measured, like he was approaching something fragile. "The maintenance crew won't be in until Monday." He moved closer to my desk. "I want you to do something not entirely proper." The words hung between us. Graham had always been steady, predictable. We lived in routines: dinner at 6, news at 7, bed by 10. I wore my long-sleeve dresses, kept my hair neat, spoke softly at faculty meetings. Proper. Always proper. "I don't understand." He pulled a small plastic card from his pocket and placed it on my desk. A key card worn smooth at the edges. "The auditorium, Saturday evening, 8 o'clock. My throat tightened. "What are you asking me to do?" "Trust me." His eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Intensity, hunger. "There will be others there, men from my department. They'll be waiting." The room felt smaller suddenly. "Graham, you've hidden yourself away for so long, Claire. Those dresses, those careful words. But I see you. I've always seen the woman underneath." I touched the collar of my blouse, a gesture so automatic I barely noticed it anymore. "What exactly do you want from me?" "I want you to let go." He leaned across my desk, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to give you permission to be who you really are." The key card sat between us like a challenge. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. I stood outside the Humanities building, the key card heavy in my palm. The campus stretched empty around me, street lights casting long shadows across the quad. I swiped the card. The lock clicked open. The hallways echoed with each footstep. Emergency lighting guided me toward the main auditorium, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd taught in these halls for 15 years, but tonight everything felt foreign. The auditorium doors stood slightly ajar. Warm light spilled through the gap. I pushed inside. 3 men waited in the front row, all from Graham's security team. I recognized Marcos, the older one with silver at his temples. Beside him sat David, younger but confident in his movements. The third was someone I'd seen in passing but never met, dark-haired with knowing eyes. They looked up as I entered, their gazes following my movement down the aisle. I felt exposed despite my conservative dress, the same navy blue I'd worn to countless faculty meetings. "Claire," Marcus stood first. "We've been waiting." My mouth went dry. "I'm not sure I understand what's supposed to happen here." David rose next, his smile gentle but direct. "Whatever you're comfortable with. No pressure." The third man remained seated, studying me with an intensity that made my skin warm. "Your husband spoke very highly of you. Said you were ready for something different." I gripped my purse tighter. "Where's Graham?" "Watching," Marcus said simply. "That's part of the arrangement." The word arrangement sent a chill through me. This wasn't spontaneous, it was planned, orchestrated. Graham had set this up, brought these men here for me. I should go. "Should you?" The dark-haired man finally stood. "Or should you stay and find out what happens when Claire stops hiding?" The auditorium speakers crackled to life. Graham's voice filled the space, warm and encouraging. "This is for you," he said through the sound system. "A gift. If you're ready, let go." I stood frozen in the aisle, 3 sets of eyes watching my every breath. The speakers carried his voice from somewhere I couldn't see, making him present and absent simultaneously. "Come closer, Claire," Marcus said, extending his hand. My feet moved before my mind could object. I walked toward the stage, past the rows of empty seats, past the point where I could easily retreat. The men formed a loose circle around me as I reached the front. "You're trembling," David observed, his voice gentle. "I'm scared," I admitted. The dark-haired man, I still didn't know his name, stepped closer. "Fear isn't always bad. Sometimes it means you're about to discover something important." My hands went to the top button of my dress. For 23 years, I'd kept myself covered, contained. High necklines, long sleeves, careful boundaries. But standing here, surrounded by these men's patient attention, something inside me shifted. I undid the first button. Marcus moved behind me, his presence steady and reassuring. David stepped to my left, close enough that I could smell his cologne. The third man remained in front, watching my face rather than my hands. "That's it," Graham's voice encouraged through the speakers. "Let them see you." Another button, another breath. The fabric loosened around my shoulders. "You're beautiful," the dark-haired man whispered, and for the first time in years, I believed it might be true. Marcus touched my arm first, his fingers gentle against skin that hadn't felt another's touch in months. I closed my eyes, letting the sensation wash over me. "Look at me," David said softly. I opened my eyes. He lifted my chin with one finger, studying my face like he was memorizing it. Behind me, Marcus's hands found my shoulders, kneading away years of tension. The third man moved closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Your husband was right about you. There's fire underneath all that propriety." I should have felt shame, standing center stage with 3 men while my husband watched from somewhere in the shadows. Instead, I felt alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Marcus's hands moved lower, tracing the curve of my spine through the thin fabric of my slip. David's thumb brushed across my cheek, then lower along my collarbone. The third man's fingers tangled in my hair, loosening pins I'd placed so carefully that morning. "This is who you are," he murmured. "This woman who responds to touch, who craves attention, who isn't afraid of her own desires." I leaned into their hands, their whispered words, their careful exploration. They treated me like something precious, something worth savoring. When was the last time Graham had looked at me that way? The stage lights warmed my skin. Every nerve felt electric, awakened. I'd spent decades being the proper faculty wife, the woman who wore cardigans and served tea at department functions. But that woman felt like a costume I'd finally shed. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was asking for. "We know," Marcus said, his voice rough with understanding. They did know. Somehow, these strangers understood what I needed better than I understood it myself. Time blurred. The men's hands guided me through territory I'd never explored, past boundaries I'd never crossed. Every touch was deliberate, reverent. They whispered encouragement, praised my courage, celebrated each small surrender. I forgot about the cameras until the moment was already complete. Graham had watched it all, every sigh, every arch of my back, every moment when I'd chosen desire over decorum. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, it sent a thrill through my exhausted body. I sat on the edge of the stage afterward, my dress draped loosely around my shoulders. my hair falling free from its careful arrangement. The men had stepped back, giving me space to breathe, to process what had just happened. Marcus handed me a bottle of water. "How do you feel?" "Different," I said, and it was true. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The woman who'd entered this auditorium 2 hours ago felt like a stranger now. David sat beside me on the stage. "Good different?" I considered the question. My body ached in places that hadn't ached in years. My lips felt swollen, my skin sensitive to the slightest breeze. But underneath the physical sensations was something deeper, a sense of recognition, like I'd finally met myself. "Yes," I said, "good different." The third man remained standing, watching me with those knowing eyes. "Your husband will be proud." Would he? Or would he regret opening this door? I thought about Graham sitting in some security office, watching his wife transform before his eyes. Had this been what he'd wanted, or had he expected something tamer, more controlled? The stage lights dimmed automatically, triggered by the late hour. In the softer light, reality began to creep back in. Monday morning would come. I'd have to face my colleagues, my students, myself in the mirror. But for now, I sat in the aftermath of my own rebellion, surrounded by men who'd helped me discover parts of myself I'd kept buried for decades. The speakers crackled one final time. "Thank you," Graham's voice said simply. "All of you." The 3 men gathered their things quietly, professionally. Marcus squeezed my shoulder as he passed. David kissed my forehead. The dark-haired man paused longest, studying my face in the dim light. "This doesn't have to be the end," he said quietly. "If you ever want to explore more." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then they were gone, leaving me alone on the stage with the weight of what I'd done. Graham appeared from the wings 5 minutes later. He walked slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might break if he moved too quickly. "You were beautiful," he said, settling beside me on the stage edge. "I betrayed you." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "Did you?" He turned to face me fully. "Or did you finally show me who you really are?" I pulled my dress tighter around myself. "I don't know how to go back to who I was before. Maybe you don't have to." The auditorium felt enormous around us, all those empty seats witnessing our conversation. Through the speakers, the building's ventilation system hummed softly, the only sound breaking our silence. "What happens now?" I asked. Graham was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I thought I did when I planned this, but watching you, seeing how you came alive, it changed something for me too." "Changed how?" "I realized I've been married to a ghost for years. The real Claire, the one I saw tonight, I haven't met her since we were young." I thought about the woman I'd been at 25, before graduate school and faculty positions and the careful construction of respectability. She'd been bolder, more curious about her own desires. Of what? Of wanting this again, of not being able to go back to our quiet little life. Graham reached for my hand. Maybe quiet isn't what either of us needs anymore. Monday morning arrived with autumn rain against our bedroom windows. I stood before the mirror, buttoning a dress I'd worn hundreds of times, but my hands moved differently now, slower, more deliberate. Graham watched from the bed, his security uniform laid out beside him. "The faculty meeting is at 10, I said. "Will you be all right?" I considered the question. Would I be all right sitting across from colleagues who'd known me for 15 years, pretending nothing had changed? Would I be all right knowing that 3 men had seen me in ways my husband hadn't for decades? I don't know, I said honestly. He rose and came to stand behind me in the mirror. We could leave, take early retirement, move somewhere no one knows us. The suggestion hung between us. Escape, reinvention, the chance to build something new from what we discovered. But running felt like another kind of hiding. No, I said. I want to see who I become when I stay. Graham nodded, understanding. In the mirror, we looked like the same couple we'd been for 23 years. But the woman looking back at me had secrets now, desires she'd acknowledged, boundaries she'd crossed. The stage lights had shown her things about herself she couldn't unknown. At breakfast, I poured coffee with steady hands. Graham read the paper, occasionally glancing up to study my face like he was still getting acquainted with this version of his wife. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "No." His answer came quickly, certain. "Do you?" I thought about the question while I buttered toast, while I gathered my papers for the day ahead. I thought about the price we'd paid. Innocence, perhaps, or the comfortable distance we'd maintained from our own hungers. "No," I said finally, "but I think we're going to have to learn how to live with who we are now." Graham folded his paper. "Together?" "Together." The rain continued as we prepared to leave for work, washing the campus clean for another week of ordinary days. But ordinary felt different now, charged with the knowledge of what lay beneath the surface of our careful, proper lives. I picked up my purse, the same one I'd clutched so tightly Saturday night. In its depths, a small plastic keycard waited, not returned, not forgotten, but kept as a reminder of doors that once opened could never quite be closed again.